Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Brooke Berlin. I'm the North American representative for Cottars. I'm very pleased to have Calvin here with us today. He's going to share with you a little bit about the family history, about the property, about the conservation work that they're doing, and also answer any of the questions then that come up during the presentation. So very much without further ado, I'm just going to hand it over to Calvin. Calvin, please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Brooke, and thank you to everyone for joining us on this webinar. Yeah, we have a lot of history, the Cottar family in Africa. First came out in 1909, my great-grandfather, from the US of A, actually, so we're Americans. And, you know, the transition was basically from a hunting life into photographic, and then from that into sustainable, should I say, sustainable conservation through easements and leases. But the story of safari has been written through the family's adventures, blood, sweat, and tears. And here you can see, for example, Charles Cottar with a very large leopard, just recently mauled by that leopard. And then Mike Cottar, and Mike also was injured by a buffalo and he died of blackwater fever eventually. And my father, Glenn Cottar, was injured by a buffalo. So that was the raw hunting life of Africa. So far, I am unscarred, I'm glad to say. But anyway, that's some of the stories. We have had a wonderful history of guiding, you know, like the Queen Mother, royalty, wealthy people, many film people over the years. My father started the first tented camp in Africa, as far as we know. It was Cottar's camp in Savo in 1964. And, you know, everyone thought he was crazy, actually, that he was going to set up a permanent tented camp for photographic safaris. And so it's been very nice for the family to have been copied many times over, put it mildly. So, yes, the story is long, and we developed many of the infrastructure and the ideas around safari, from how the tents is shaped to how the cars are rigged. And you can see the photographic rig on the right for Paul Hopler's Africa Speaks Safari, the very first color film in Africa. And also the amazing stories around Martin and Ursa Johnson were all lived through the Cottar's guidance and outfitting capabilities. So this just gives you a little snippet of some of the camps and the experiences that they were offering. They were a lot less luxurious than modern safaris. However, we have got a conservancy camp that looks very similar to this, and I'll explain that as we go along. This is Ursa Johnson riding a zebra. The zebra is owned by an Italian doctor in Nairobi, but Martin and Ursa Johnson were guided by the Cottars up to Lake Paradise, and were very famous in their day of sort of showing the American public what Africa was about. And she wrote a book called I Dreamed, I Married Adventure, and they were very famous people in those days. So where are the Cottars now? We are in the Maasai Mara National Reserve, or just outside of it on the southeast. And you can see just on the lower right of the map. The main thing is that this map you'll all be aware of. You'll have seen it before if you ever sold the Mara. You'll understand that most of this map, especially along the Mara River, along the big river system coming from the center of the screen down, that is where a lot of over-tourism is. Lodges, hotels, congestion, I would say. One of the tragedies of the Mara is its problems with over-tourism. But on the far corner on the right here, we don't have that issue. We have maintained the wilderness by leasing sites and ensuring that there isn't many lodges, or actually any lodges, near us. And this is what we want. Our guests want wilderness with wildlife in it. It's not a zoo that they want. They want the wilderness. And this is what we do. We proactively lease the sites that would be other lodges so that there are no other tourism operators. So keep that in mind as we go along. So we have 3 facilities. This is the 1920s camp, and you can see it harks back to the history, the more elegant history than our camps, I must say. And it is really about giving folks that wonderful feeling of the golden era between the wars, when everyone was light from and looking forward to an optimistic future. And of course, a lot of Westerners traveled to Africa at that time. It's really beautiful. As you can see, communal dining, sensitive, elegant. And here we have 4 double tents. They're very open, very traditional tentage. We would never change. There's no glass in this room, only the mirror in the wall, but there's no glass windows or anything. So it's a true tent, unlike many modern lodges that have fake tents. And I'll just say it's super comfortable with big picture views. And by the way, the Mara is very high altitude, so it's never very hot there. It's about 6,000 foot altitude. We also have 4 family tents, and the family tents are really ideal for, only for families. They're too small to really be for 2 couples. So they're rigged for this. The costings are based around mom, dad, and 2 kids. 3 if we have to. So yeah, they're very comfortable. We welcome kids. We're child friendly. I brought up my own kids here, so why wouldn't I have my guest kids there? It's all about management of families, like, whether the parents feeling uncomfortable with their kids around other people, or whether it's the honeymooners don't want kids around. All of that is about management and space. We have 3 dining rooms, private vehicles. All of this is just management, and we're very, very happy to do this. So we have a honeymoon tent, although that's going to be upgraded this year, actually. We're doing a refurb of the camp as we speak, even in this time of COVID. But you can see that the honeymoon suite, very comfortable. It specializes on ambiance, romance feeling. And this is all about the bath, the bush bath that you can see here. And so, the honeymoon never ends, folks. Whether you're in a normal tent or the honeymoon tent, we do the bush baths for you. And it's the best thing you'll ever experience. And, because we're a lodge that has guests coming from other very well and very, very rigged out places, we have all the same amenities. That is Wi-Fi, and, we've got spa, massage, we've got pools. We've got 2 pools, actually. And just so you'll have everything you could possibly need in a hotel. But here you don't see it. It's not in your face. The pool is not in front of the dining room. It's got its own area. You have to walk down to it. It's very comfortable. So onto the villa, our second property. And this villa is 5 bedroomed, obviously got a swimming pool. And it's large. It's like 12,000 square feet. All of it on Maasai land, important to know. It's very large communal areas, very elegant. I think it's the only actual luxury villa in the Mara ecosystem, I believe. So it's got only 1 group at a time is allowed in there, never doubling up groups. People stay longer, they do more activities. They'll do 3 days of game drive, and then maybe 2 more centered around the villa. Very good for family and for extended families, and for sort of paparazzi averse people that want privacy. The rooms are all different. That's the beauty of this villa, is that everything is so different. Any corner of the house. It's got its own chef. It's got its own vehicle, its own guides, and you can want for nothing. So here we have the 3rd camp or service, is the conservancy or conservation camp. And this is a much more simple camp. The price point is achievable for anyone, and it can be added on to a safari to the other big camps. And this is really to expose people to the conservancy work that we do and the community work that we do. The conservancy camp is closer to the community in the conservancy, but just closer to the community. It's also great to walk to ride the e-bikes to. We have e-bikes as well, yes, and also running. We do running with the Maasai as well. But the bottom line is that you stay here a couple of nights to experience those things. Profits go back into the conservancy as well. And, in all of these camps, you get the same majestic wildlife that you would expect of the Mara. Rhino, elephant, lion, leopard. The largest herds of giraffe in the ecosystem are around Cottars. And just to say that you can see amazing wildlife throughout the year here, including when there's no wildebeest, we have all the large megafauna browsers there, and the lions don't leave. The cheetahs don't leave. The mara, when there's no wildebeest, is better than anywhere else in Africa at its best. Just keep that in mind. It's an amazing wildlife experience. And so at Cottars, we want to make memories for people that they'll never forget. So we give a diversity of experience, and from Let doing a nature walk, or he's quite famous he's got his own YouTube link that has 7 million viewers of his life as a hunter-gatherer, and showing how a hunter-gatherer lives. It's called Let. We also do the Maasai warrior school for kids of all ages, and we find parents are usually competing with the kids at bows and arrows. It's wonderful fun. Going to the community centers, the villages, and the e-bikes. And the old car, you can see the old car on the right here. This is one of a kind in Africa, the only one of its kind. Everyone gets a chance in that. And of course, the Sand River pools, which is a very private area. No one else gets to the Sand River but us, by the way. It's unique. No crocodiles in it, I'm glad to say. So we have a wonderful staff, some of whom have been with us over 40 years. And I'd just like to say that, well, some of the older guys are a bit slower than they used to be. Our guests come back from them. They've made connections going back multiple safaris. And yeah, I can just say I'm very proud of our staff. They represent the values of Cottars, and we are very, very proud to have them with us. Also, I would like to say that the guests that come to Cottars come back multiple times. As long as our staff has been with us, some guests have been with us. The longest ever is a friend who's come out over 50 times, but 30, 35, 25 times is not unusual either. Guests coming back to Cottars on safari. So as we talk about the experience on safari and the camp and what we offer, I would say that this is an unusual situation because we're selling luxury, but we realize we needed to define ourselves differently from other properties. And there are so many other properties out there. So we looked for accreditation services or accreditation processes that would validate what we're doing. And we found the Long Run. The Long Run is we're a founder member of the Long Run, and I would say that it has been really a revelation because it gives us an ongoing process of improvement through the 4 C's: conservation, community, culture, and commerce. So every year we have to improve in all 4 C's, and this gives us goals every year that we would never normally have achieved. So we're very proud to be part of this. And in the long run, there's 12 GERs, Global Ecosphere Retreats, and between us all, we secure or control 25 million acres of land around the world. That's what sustainable tourism is all about. So in our efforts to do conservation and to do it right, we realized we needed a vehicle, the Cottars Wildlife Conservation Trust, which could actually do the work. And so it's a non-profit, and it does the leasing of land on behalf of the tourism companies. But they're unconnected. It just has our name on it. But we have a neutral board, and it's got its own goals and our ambitions. So this is our vehicle. We lease land through it, and this is our model of conservation. But to come to the problem of wildlife and conservation and where tourism can work. Oh, Jesus. What happened there now? Okay, we're here. You just have to cut it out. So we have to look at what is the reality of the problem here, and this is that 8% of the country is national park and reserve, but wildlife lives. 70% of wildlife live outside of national parks and reserves, and the map on the right is the yellow area of human-wildlife conflict. That gives you an idea where the real problem is. And land that is in conflict with wildlife is probably in conversion. Please just tell them to be quiet, of course. So land that is under conflict, that is where the wildlife tragedy is happening. As people convert their land away from wildlife because it's conflicting with their needs, and their needs is growing food, and going to grow food in a monoculture, fragmented farming, subsistence farming way. And the tragedy or the problem is that tourism and wildlife doesn't pay the communities enough to sustain and keep wildlife and biodiversity intact on their land. So just to understand, this is the problem we have. We're losing wildlife at up to 4% per annum. We have lost close to 80% in the last 40 years through land use change. And in the process, there's poaching, there's bushmeat poaching, there's ivory poaching. Think of this as being a byproduct of land use change. Fundamentally, they're going to be eating the protein as they remove it. And who can blame them when wildlife is not paying them as such? The problem stems from colonial laws, where feudal European laws were imposed on Africa, and it's made it royal game into state ownership of wildlife. And this is the fundamental issue around that we have found. And I don't know why I missed the screen. Okay, and the issue is really what you can see on this map. The purple area is land that's already being converted, and I hope you can see that around the Maasai Mara area. The growth of agriculture area is going at 8% per year. You can see clearly that all this area that is not purple will probably go that way in the next few years. And our conservancies are doing everything they can to stop this process. And the effect on elephants, this is all elephant corridors, the red lines. The effect on elephant corridors, if you compare the two maps, you just see there and there, you'll see that it'll just stop those corridors, and where elephants are living, they will no longer be allowed to live. And there'll be human wildlife conflict. It's a tragedy unfolding in front of us. This is the problem, that the Maasai are trying to control their land through fencing so that they can stop not only wildlife, but the neighbors' cows on their land. And how do we convince the people, the poorest people on the planet, to not put a fence up, to not cut the forest down, and to make those fence posts, and to keep it open? And so we have designed, new ways to do this. And you can see, okay, there is a growing population, 12% growth in this area every year, 12%. And it's not from fast reproduction. This is from immigration, people coming in where pressure of land has forced them out elsewhere. And they're coming in to be near the Mara because there's tourism money, but also there's still space. And this is the tragedy we have. So where are the elephants going to go? Where are the elephants going to go? So we've come to a solution. One of them is, the most important things we can do is a theory of change process to convince the landowners that maybe they should consider wildlife as a way of earning a living. But to do that, you have to have a four-pathway approach, that you do these four pathways at the same time. Disincentivize illegal wildlife use, such as poaching. Incentivize wildlife as a land use, for like a biodiversity easement or leases. 3 is reduce human-wildlife conflict, and this is basically the process of identifying where people want to live, what they want: agriculture, grazing areas, wildlife areas, tourism, etc. So that's, we've got to bring thousands of people into this decision. And D is supporting non-wildlife related livelihoods. And so this is actually the key. How do you get this? That half of the population are under 15. Where is this use going to actually work in the future? Are they going to herd goats or cattle? What are they going to do? So supporting non-wildlife related livelihoods basically means to urbanize people, to bring them into centers where there's water, medicine. Oh, what's happened? Can you see me? Can you see me?
Yep.
I don't know, it does that,
Nope,
Anyway,
you're perfect. Carry on.
Okay.
It's perfect.
So we're trying to give the young people and the people generally more options around urban bases, inside urban areas, industry, and basically joining the multiplier industry economy, so that they're not just trading on the land, whether it is crops or bushmeat or ivory. They're actually trading other services and goods to each other, that like we all do. And this is the way we can take the pressure off the land. But if you don't do these 4 pathways, there's no way you can convince anyone to keep wildlife on their land. So this is key. And what it looks like is this. This is the result of doing a theory of change process. You actually help the thousands of people in that community identify where they want villages. The pink circles there are villages that we now know that we have to invest in those villages, not other villages, because this is the future centers. We know where agriculture is going to be. We know where the future corridor. We can see the communities have allowed space for future wildlife corridors and actually living space for wildlife. And I can just say that without this, there's no chance for conservation. You've got to make a plan. But it all hinges on this land, conservancy land, being leased or paid an easement to the community. And the idea of an easement is basically to allow them to make more money per hectare per year than they can from doing other things. For example, crops, from cattle. It doesn't mean to say you can't do cattle with wildlife, because there are all sorts of models around that. But I'm just going to get my screen going again. What? I'm just starting the case. Now, I don't know why it does that. So this doesn't mean to say that cattle are not allowed there. If the deal is that you have cattle there, then you do it on a stocking rate basis and you pay maybe less for the biodiversity easement. And you have maybe around tourism areas, you have a higher rate paid for where you don't want cattle. But this sort of intelligent thinking is the way forward in conservation. And we are very proud to be part of these new ideas. And ultimately, what we're looking at is an extended program of easements and leases. They call here in the Mara, it's called the Mara Conservancies. And there are 15 conservancies. We are just one of them on the far right, lower right. But you can see how large the conservancies are covered. It's actually just about the same size as the Mara Reserve itself. And there are hundreds of thousands of landowners involved in these as beneficiaries of this conservancy model. But the yellow area is the greater Mara ecosystem that we still have to reach to. We have to try to lease all that land, because in this area, the yellow area and the green area and the brown area is where 25% of Kenya's wildlife lives. Total wildlife numbers live in this particular area. Essentially, our tourism product depends on this capture area for the Maasai Mara wildlife. So this is just food for thought. I'd like to say that we have, in the tourism industry, maybe we need to, what this COVID experience has given us is the understanding that sustainable tourism, or tourism, has to be more sustainable for conservation. And how do we do this? So there's lots of ideas around, maybe the tourism selling chain should probably contribute more in the good times towards sort of a central fund that can help countries' conservation efforts in bad times. Say, if Kenya had another civil disturbances in an election, or Tanzania or whatever, that those conservation projects continue to be funded when tourism has collapsed, because tourists are not going to fly. And keep in mind that when you look at that green Maasai Mara area, think carefully about where you send your clients, because that area called the Mara Reserve or any national park is already secured. It's already secured by law. And so if there wasn't a single tourist in that game reserve, it is still law that it has to be funded by the state. Not to say that we don't go in there for tourism, but if tourism is going to be based there in lodges and hotels, the issue is really about, well, what is the opportunity cost for conservation outside if all of the lodges are inside? Maybe the lodges should be outside, and leasing land on a per hectare per year basis per room, and securing all that land around the Mara, and we all just go into the reserve. obviously we pay to go into the reserve. And so these are the sort of ideas we've got to think about. And I'll just go into, we have had, I must say, our own efforts came to a full stop. Conservation efforts came to a full stop when COVID hit. Suddenly tourism dropped off. We're not unusual. All the conservancies around Africa have had the same problem. So we have a little appeal going on to help us keep going. And you're welcome to have a look at that. And I would just like to say, join us in the future of conservation, in our new ideas. And I open the floor to questions now.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much, Calvin. And we definitely do have some questions coming in. So hold on just 1 second for me. All right, fantastic. First question for you. If the Mara National Park is viewed as suffering with over-tourism, is the Kenyan government open to expanding the national park areas to increase the quality of safari experience and thus more likely to attract high-end clients? Would they assist the conservancies, and do you want them to help you expand?
Well, I think that's a great question. I believe that the answer is we don't want government to be as such taking areas from communities to create new national parks. Not at all. What we really want is the communities to make that decision that they want wildlife, and that basically the conservancy movement is exactly this. Tourism is funding the lease and easements so that the community wants wildlife. So we don't want government to step in. Are you there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I've just lost yours. I can't see you now.
That's fine.
Anyway, so the issue is this, that we don't want government to step in and take more land, because the history of national parks was some guys saying we want this land for wildlife, and then the next thing you know was people were moved off the land forever, and people effectively lost land to wildlife. What the narrative now is that, yeah, the communities are offered a chance to make a better living off wildlife than any other land use, so that they want the wildlife to be there. So it becomes, a conservancy is a private national park in a way. Yes. So next question.
Do the elephant corridors reach Kuku Campo Yakanji? I don't speak Swahili.
Yeah. Kuku and Kampikanzi. I know Lucas' place. No, the answer is that there's nothing stopping them from going there, but there are different elephant populations with natural barriers like the Rift Valley and others. So essentially there are different set of elephants between the two areas. There may be some small overlap in the Shompoli area, but yeah, I wouldn't expect a Mara elephant to be going to Kampiakanzi or Kuku. And that is all the Tsavo elephant, Tsavo Amboseli complex of elephants, whereas this is the Mara Serengeti complex.
Okay, a couple more questions about elephants. I learned about beehives put on fences to prevent elephants from destroying fences as long as they have corridors to move. Is this working? What are your thoughts on this?
So, it is certainly a tool, but, that is an example of a soft edge solution. And in our pillar C, what we have realized is that we have to give people an idea of where the hard edge is going to be between their villages, their agriculture, so that they have a clear indication of their future. That people have to plan for elephants in one area, plan for their agriculture in another, plan for their villages. So the answer is we're trying to not have soft edges, because that is just human-wildlife conflict. That denotes human-wildlife conflict, and aim for hard edges. So soft edges are not desirable. They're simply tools that one uses in the interim before the land use plan can be imposed, or not imposed, but abided to by the community, and funding can be found for fencing of villages or agriculture. And this is what we're aiming for. So there's actually a land use solution rather than rather than bee. By the way, elephants will go through bees when they're hungry anyway. There's no bees that are going to stop elephants ultimately from getting into maize at night. When they're really hungry, they're going to be getting the maize. Let me assure you that. So it's a temporary solution.
So speaking about edges and fences, is the 1920s camp fenced?
No, absolutely not. A fence, to me, defines, for tourism anyway, it defines the loss of wilderness. It defines the wrong mentality. And I would certainly not be in my camp if there was a fence around it. The minute I have to have a fence for any reason is the minute I'm not in that place. So we're lucky in Kenya. We don't have those sort of. It is up to us, the camp managers to decide, or camp owners to decide whether we want a fence or not. Some people do it for insurance reasons. We don't, because we have trust or ability in our abilities to keep people safe day and night. We have experience. We know there's a difference between hotel keepers coming into the safari world and safari people going to the hotel world. It's a very important difference. We believe in our abilities in the bush. They believe in their abilities in being a hotel keeper, and they putting a fence around a hotel is an easy solution to keep people safe. It is not the case in Kenya. We need elephants and lions wandering through camp at night. We want to hear the wilderness outside our campus. It's not scary. You're completely safe. We know what we're doing. So the answer is no fences.
I like that you started to speak about people, because that moves into a couple of questions about community. I noticed in the presentation, one of the slides, it was very slow to actually bring up the photo of the boutique. So I want to speak about people. The necklace I'm wearing, I actually bought at the boutique at Cottar's, because they work with the Maasai in a really beautiful way, including making pieces. And so the question is, once you work with a community to pay them for opening up their land to wildlife conservation and stopping agriculture or grazing, what becomes their livelihood other than receiving funds from your organization? Do they work in other fields? Are they re-educated to do other work?
That's a great question. And yes, it's going to be a slow process of people only relying on the land and their domestic stock and maybe crops, into joining the multiplier economy where they're selling services and goods to each other. So let me just give you an example. In the first world, only 0.5% of the population grows food for the entirety of the developed world. Whereas in Kenya and most of Africa, is 40, 50, even 60% of the population is growing food for themselves, usually something called subsistence farming. And subsistence farming is often extremely inefficient, and this is the kind of farming that is causing the destruction of biodiversity, because every patch of Africa is owned by someone, and they have to convert that patch, not another patch, but that patch, and only that patch, because that's what the title deed says. That is their only source of food. So the quicker we have them less reliant on having to grow food off that land and actually pay an easement to keep it, so then they can come to the villages and climb up the hierarchy of needs by being in the multiplier modern economy. So this is why we need to have in Pillar D a lot more investment in microfinance, vocational training, everything from doing bees, rotoscoping, any kind of industry training that we can do, carpentry, mechanics, making things, any kind of also zero grazing, chickens, monocultures using less space, but high production, vertical farming, all of that. That is important to be promoting. So yes, I see a future to fast track local communities in Kenya into the modern economy by a combination of easement payments on their land and investment in the infrastructure and opportunities in the towns. Yep, that's the answer.
And so I guess then this next one would be kind of the next step from that. Over the years, how have you seen the Maasai culture change? And has it been positive or negative? The first time I was in Kenya, the Manyatta we visited felt like an authentic experience, where the second time the people were much more aggressive in selling their crafts, and it felt much more transactional.
Mm-hmm. Well, this This whole thing about being transactional, it's about opportunism and desperation. So there's a lot less resources to go around for a lot more people, and particularly the tourism dollar. So the aggressive sell, sadly, is there. But okay, at Cottars, you don't get that because we work with our community to show them that this is not the way to get people to willingly buy your goods. So first of all, that's the first thing we do. We do sell in the shop, but we also, when we go to the village, they lay it all out nicely and everyone sits there beside their table with their wares out, and you can just walk within the center of the circle and go around and you can choose your goods that you want to buy. So the question about how have the Maasai changed, it's really about, it's not about if they have, it's about when they will change to join the modern world. And the modern world it's already happening, whether we're there or not. There's more telephone or cell phone usage in Kenya than anywhere almost. I mean, the phone bank system, M-Pesa, was developed in Kenya and has revolutionized industry. So every old Maasai mama has got their phone. And so this change is happening. Motorbikes are everywhere. That's the new mode of transportation. So what tourism and conservationists have to get used to is, and they have to get used to the idea that the Maasai are going to change with or without wildlife and tourism. So it's a much better strategy to help the Maasai climb out of poverty, join the modern world, and adapt for this new economy and this new world, rather than thinking to keep them poor in a mud village, in a mud hut down there somewhere. And this is great because they're authentic. There's no contradiction to have a nice house in a village with water, with power, with opportunity, and yet also having the landscape out there, as far as you can see, secured by easements and leases, and having a herd of cows with a Maasai walking, beautiful red-robed Maasai with a spear, walking through that landscape. In fact, doing what we're doing is going to keep the culture intact more than the subsistence farming land fragmentation model that currently is the trend. So we will keep culture better than the other option that they have. The answer is I'm hopeful, very hopeful, that we'll keep the Maasai as traditional, but also in a better economic shape than before.
I was smiling there for a second because as you were talking, it reminded me of probably the last time I was at Cottars with Johan, and we went out with some other guests, and Enoch and Joseph, who are two of my favorite guides at Cottars, and we took the e-bikes out. And so we biked out into the village. We visited the school. I remember Enoch just telling me how proud he was of the school because he has his own family members there. And then we rode through the village, and just to be able to experience the Maasai on foot, on bike, off of a vehicle, and with your guides is such a beautiful experience. And it really is very different than, even for myself, many of the other experiences that I've had in Kenya and Tanzania. Okay, definitely have a couple more. Okay, well, we've gotten a lot of just requests saying, this is very inspiring and people would love to understand how we get Calvin to share his philosophy and on hands-on work to more of our travelers, websites, et cetera, et cetera. So basically I'll say, I think especially right now, Calvin has time and is very happy to partner with you, to participate with you. If you want to do something private specifically for your clients, the Cottars Wildlife Conservation Trust just launched a brand new website the other day. This recording will be made public. So there's lots of ways that we can work with all of you to get Calvin and the message out to your clients and to your networks. Similarly, we're getting requests for specific photos, like the old photos that Calvin shared of his family. And so similarly, we'll share the presentation, we'll share photos, and if there's anything that you've seen or that you want, let me know. We'll get the team to make sure that we have everything that you need. Yeah. Another question then, does Cottars act as a DMC?
Yes, great question. So yes, we do. We've got Cottar Safari Service, a completely different company. This is actually the company that has been existing for 100 years, is Cottar Safari Service, based in Nairobi, but we send guests all over East Africa, and we have also some to Southern Africa, but mostly East Africa. So Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, mostly. We are very aware of the we don't want to be a threat or step on the toes of our friend DMCs in Kenya and elsewhere that send us business. So we're very careful always to not compete with guests coming from DMCs, but we're here to offer the service of putting the right places together with cotters. And there are a few places that work very, very well with cotters. There are other places that are too different, that it's disjointed. So I would say there are some wonderful properties. We tend to favor the properties that are family or owner managed, and there's a few out there I can name. But the bottom line is, if it's owner managed and been there a long time, it's probably quality. And we know the names of the ones that we work with throughout Africa, actually, and particularly in Kenya. Yes, we're happy to help.
I think people would actually like a couple of examples of that, because another question is, do you partner with any other lodges in other areas for a complete Kenya circuit?
Sure. So the beauty about being Cottar's 1920s camp and villa, being sort of not on any collection or grouping, it was just Cottar's. We actually get clients from many other groupings coming to Cottar's. We're non-competitive with them. But we also do sell some wonderful connections. Old Jogi, Segera is a long-run member, Borana, Sarara, quite a few. And also in the Mara, we work with some of the older names, Alex Walker, Richard Roberts, Ricardo Orizio, and there's quite a few others that we work with. We don't, we're very willing to adapt itineraries to clients' wishes, and we'll try to put people into the right places. So we're also very careful about choosing the places doing the right thing on the ground, that are actually doing conservation. And so, yeah, we're kind of picky where we'll put people. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, and I was going to mention, in terms of an actual package or a pairing, when people look at a circuit, I know that Cottar's has a very specific package where you end up getting a discount rate with Alfajiri villas on Diani Beach, because you've got the private villa at Cottar's and then the private villa at Alfajiri. But then that also leads into another question, because I think Diani is an amazing beach destination in Kenya. It's the only beach destination I've been to in Kenya. So the question for you then, Calvin, is Lamu still a great destination?
Oh, first of all, the Kenya coast is the most magical coastline in all of Africa. And Lamu in particular is the most incredible place. And Paponis is a piece of magic. It's straight out of a storybook. It's just magic. So yes, I would go there in a second. There are some restrictions in travel for certain citizens of nations, but if you can get to Paponis, definitely try to get there. Try to do it if you can. Exceptional and very good people.
And you were speaking about pairing with some other really wonderful properties in the Mara ecosystem. What about seasonality? Is Cottar's open year round? Why do some properties close down because of black cotton soil, but you don't have to? Talk about the new runway that or the new airstrip at Cottar's that makes it more accessible.
Yep. Okay. So the beauty of Cottar's is that we've got our own private airstrip, and we have scheduled flights coming in, first of all. The seasonality usually is driven around the migration arriving and price points. In the busy season, we've got a higher price just because there's so much demand. And at the end of the day, it's about quality. So there's different price points through the year. Busy seasons usually June, July, August into September, and of course Christmas period. And yeah, so the bottom line is the Mara is unfortunately hampered by the fact that people think it's only worth visiting when the migration is there. And I would beg to differ. It's actually better outside of migration period. First of all, there's less tourism outside of the migration period, but B, so you have more wilderness, but B, you have the wildlife is more, it's harder to see, but it's all there. So you have to work hard, but when you see it, it's quality. And the lions are eating buffalo or hunting buffaloes and giraffe. They're not hunting wildebeest because there are no wildebeest. That happens, in June, July, August. And so the rest of the year you get, I'd say, wildlife, as opposed to, the kind of stranger spirits of the migration, where they just bowl over wildebeest left, right, and center. Yes. So that's what I have to say about that. The cottage is very accessible, but it's private. It's super private.
Yeah, I like that. We've had a lot of conversations in the industry recently about people preferring to travel outside of peak season, looking for the privacy, looking to stay at places longer. And Calvin just kind of high level mentioned it, but the combination of the conservation camp with the 1920s camp, or the conservation camp with the villa, actually makes for a really nice week-long stay, if not more, where you're in one area but getting two vastly different experiences, and both really wonderful for families. Another question that came in was about the family tents, and if you could go higher than the 2 or 3 children in the family tent. And I do believe that we can go up to 4 children in the family tent and still guarantee a private vehicle, private dining, private experiences for the family tents, for the villa, and can then absolutely make that happen as well for people that want that staying at 1920s. And then I think the last question that we have, actually, as we are finishing up talking about families, is what about malaria in the area?
Yep. So malaria, I can say that I live in this place exactly here because there is no malaria. It's too high. It's 6,300 foot altitude. I sleep at peace. I've had malaria from many other places, but I don't have to ever worry about it here. Having said that, there is malaria in Kenya. So, I would say that you'd have to still take your malarial meds. But in our place, there isn't. I'm guaranteed. I'm the magnet for mosquitoes. And so I'd say you don't have to worry about it where we are. But yeah, it does exist in the Mara, lower down in altitude along the Mara River, maybe going down into Serengeti, down towards Musoma and all that area. But for us, it's non-existent.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think that those are all of the questions that we have for today. And very much, again, thank everyone for their time. If there are more questions, please feel free to send them along to me. I'll pass them on to the team. And again, just thank you, everyone. Thank you, Calvin. Very much appreciate everyone's time today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brooke. And I'd just like to say a parting word. And it is that we need to change the definition of sustainable tourism to be more based around what properties and agencies actually secure in space, in land area. And we have to think differently about how sustainable tourism works. For example, offsetting the carbon of the economy. We need to make long-haul travel to Africa the best way to help the planet. And how do we do that? If we all get into conglomerates to secure and lease land on a large scale, we can actually relate that back to carbon, the carbon it takes to get there, and we can actually prove that actually going a long haul travel to Africa is better for the planet than to not travel to Africa. You see what I'm saying? This is the new narrative, or new conservation narrative that we have to push. And thank you, everyone, for being part of our journey. You're all there. I appreciate every guest you send, and thanks for attending this webinar.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.